So people are still coming in. Hopefully by the time we have the minister's presentation, we'll have more people. So good morning. Welcome to the 2021 Solar Energy Future Conference, hosted by Leaders Associates. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the Wurundjeri people, the traditional custodians of the land upon which we meet today, and pay my respects to their elders, past and present. And I extend that respect to the First Nation persons present here today. My name is Simon Zhang. I'm a PhD student at the UNSW Renewable Energy School, and I'm a friend of the Leaders Associates, and I'd like to congratulate them on the successful opening of these conferences today. The Leaders Associates are global leading renewable energy conference organizer, event organizer, and they're committed to clean energy and stands at the forefront of environmental sustainability. They have faith in their work to make renewable energy available and affordable through practical business platforms and through non-business programs. These conferences that LA has worked tirelessly to organize, I'm not exaggerating when I say have been filled with trials and tribulations. But together with the team here in Australia, they have ensured that these conferences comply with all states' rules and regulations, as well as adopting the official recommendations to ensure that the event runs as COVID safe as possible. Event organizing has been difficult through the pandemic, and although after 1.5 years of Zoom, I'm sure many of you would appreciate seeing each other in person. And that makes it worth it. But unfortunately, due to still various lockdowns and restrictions, we still have some conferences guests that couldn't make it in person and will instead join us in video. But among those who are here today, I'd like to extend a special welcome to the Victorian State Energy Minister, the Honourable Lily D'Ambrosio. All right, just before we begin, a few housekeeping tips. The toilets are directly outside to the left. And when we have a break, we will have the coffee and tea break, once in the morning, once in the afternoon. That's directly outside, as well as lunch, also directly outside. But the lunch is outside of all three rooms, but the coffee and tea are also only in this room and in the outside the wings room. Exhibition and one-on-one discussions are in the room that's directly that's neighboring the registration area. And yeah, so please keep your mask on if you've got a mask, and let us know if you feel unwell at all. All right, now once again, on behalf of Leaders Associates, thank you for joining us this morning, and we hope you enjoy the sessions that we have in store for you today. Now I'd like to hand over to the chair of our plenary session today, Mr. David Leitch. David is the principal at ITK Services Australia, and he is an energy investment consultant. He also runs the Energy Insiders podcast, which is I'm sure you've all heard of and probably listened to. All right, welcome, David.
Thanks very much, Simon. We've only got a relatively small session here, but speaking as an ex-investment banking analyst, I can tell you that when everyone turns up to a conference, it's generally the story's already there and there's nothing to learn. Sometimes the best conferences are the ones with the least people, where people, I hope all our participants today and presenters will be able to tell us something that's interesting, and conferences are great for the information that's shared and the networking benefits. So it's great to have the conference going again. I am, as Simon said, your chair for the day. I'll try and stay out of the way as much as possible. In a couple of minutes, because we're already a little behind schedule, and I'll ask all our speakers to more or less stick to their allotted time slots, and we'll try and fit in time for some questions if there are any. In the couple of minutes that I want to take, I'm going to make a couple of very simple points. A few years ago, South Australia ran a great experiment, as the Prime Minister of the day, Malcolm Turnbull, said, following a blackout. And you know, I'm pleased to report, as we all, I think, in this room expected, that experiment's been outstandingly successful. And South Australia now runs very largely on renewable energy, with some imports from Victoria. And it can even run for brief periods in time entirely off rooftop solar, which is wonderful. Indeed, generally, the progress of renewable energy in Australia is fantastic here. We have a lot, all of us, to be very proud of in the pace that we're making and continuing to make, understanding it's not fast enough. I won't say much about federal policy, but I do think that both the Liberal Party and the Labor Party have missed a trick in, if you're going to go with the emissions reduction scheme, in not linking up renewable energy certificates to be able to acquit themselves under that scheme, because if we look at a carbon abatement curve, electricity and electrification is generally regarded as the lowest cost way, particularly in a country in Australia, which has great renewable energy resources. We do have some limitations. Prices in Victoria and South Australia are about $30 or $40 less in the wholesale market than they are in New South Wales at the moment. And the reason for that largely is because there's not enough transmission access between New South Wales and Victoria. And there are various constraints in the system that need to be run down, that need to be improved, I should say. And in general, if you want to be in the utility solar business as opposed to the rooftop business or the utility wind business, you're going to need transmission for wind particularly, and storage to an extent, but also transmission for solar. And so these are two areas where people who design the rules for the system and make policy and ensure that the investment flows could spend a lot of time working on, in my opinion. The only other thing I want to mention, being down here in Victoria, but being from New South Wales, is that one of the consequences of the lack of federal coordination of the whole thing is that each state is running its own race, as I think we all know at the moment. One of the consequences for that is that New South Wales is going to move from being an energy importer, an electricity importer, to being a neutral or even an exporter of power on balance as a result of the aggressive policy, one I greatly favour, but it is aggressive, adopted by Matt Kean, going ahead full steam with the full support of a very enthusiastic bureaucracy up there, as I'm sure we have down here in Victoria. But that means that Victoria and Queensland are both going to lose some market share probably, and won't be able to export as much energy to New South Wales going forward. One of the other great things going on in Australia, the thing that really distinguishes us from every other decarbonisation market in the world, is the huge penetration of rooftop solar. Where of course we've got this so much detached housing that's and widely separated, a thin network. It's like a perfect market to have rooftop solar, and we do have a wonderful rooftop business, which I think provides something like 10% of the electricity here in Victoria just at the moment in spring. But that does bring about a lot of problems for utility solar and people that have to compete with it. But one of the people, I guess, organisations facilitating the solar market in general and increasing the solar storage market is SunGrow, which I do believe is a top 5 inverter by volume seller in Australia, and growing quite quickly into the utility market as well. But to hear a little bit more about that, I'd like to hand over to Terry Wan, Chief Executive of SunGrow here in Australia.
Okay. Thanks, David. Good morning, everyone, ladies and gentlemen. Today, I'm very happy to be here. Thanks to the organizer to arrange this conference in this special moment. My name is Terry, and I'm come from SunGrow. I'm head of the energy storage business in Asia Pacific region. Over the next few minutes, I would like to share my brief understanding about the renewable future and what SunGrow is. Yeah. Okay. Our climate is changing adversely and very quickly. Luckily, we see now more and more countries have made their commitments. I mean, to meet the net zero emission. Despite the COVID-19 impact, we also see the global investment in renewable energy increased by 2% in last year. Australia is always decarbonizing its energy supply, and also we see Australia plays a leading role in the world. we see there is ongoing interest to increase the level of the renewable energy. With most of the Australia states government has established their own target. However, while we see many opportunities here, we also see many challenges in the market. As we may be aware that the electricity, the downward electricity price may continue over next few years, and the new policy supportive policy is required. Also, we see now the transmission line is inadequate to afford more and more renewable generation, because my previous background is the third grid of China, which I just talked with David just now. So, so all of this, I think, may set the uncertainties to the renewable market in Australia. I noticed later the industrial leaders will give more valuable advice later today. So I want to give a few words of, to introduce my company. Yeah. Okay. So we see that Sungrow was founded by the university professor in 1997. We started to expand into the global market in 2006, and we get publicly listed in Shenzhen Stock Exchange in 2011. From 2015, I mean, Sungrow, we become the #1 global inverter supplier in the world, and we maintain this position till now. We are happy to have our first overseas factory in India in 2018, and we see our second one in Thailand this year. In 2019, we hit 100 gigawatt inverter installation. I think this figure may double till now. And last year we joined the Renewable Energy Club 100. Yeah. So Sungrow has been dedicated in the conversion technology in the past 24 years. We are the world's most bankable inverter brand, and Bloomberg NEF released its first inverter bankability report in 2019. Sungrow was the only one to be ranked 100% bankable for 2 consecutive years globally. And NEF demonstrated that projects using Sungrow inverters may get maybe more likely to get financing from banks compared to other suppliers. Yeah. So starting from the inverter business, Sungrow has diversified into various of the segments of renewable energy industry. For example, we have the energy storage business, which I'm covering, and also have floating PV system. We also have the project development business. And also we have the new energy vehicle driven systems, when the energy converter and EV charging station. Maybe I mean, I see that notice about the time limit. Maybe I'll make quick. So Sungrow always keep the sustainable development, and our annual compound growth rates of revenue during 2010 to 2020 is around 42%. Okay. Today I want to give more introduction about our energy storage business. We started this in 2006, and in 2017 we launched our new cutting-edge 1,500 voltage energy storage systems. In the year 2019, we signed the global largest energy storage stack start project in the United States. Last year, our shipment is exceed 800 megawatt hour. And this year, we launched our latest liquid cooling energy storage system. We win the largest solar and the energy storage project in Southeast Asia. That is 136 in Thailand from the Super Energy. And later this year, we also signed the world's largest energy storage project in the United States. That is 900 megawatt hour key capture energy. So I want to mention one thing is all these projects we have done, we received 0 accident report, which means that we always put the safety and reliability as our priority consideration. So we are pretty much an international company. We have more than 20 international subsidiary companies. Also, we have a subsidiary company in Sydney. We have more than 200 service outlets globally. So that we can provide 24 hours and 7-day service and with local warehouses, which could perfectly meet our clients' requirements. So according to the latest data, Sungrow generates about 257.3 billion kilowatt-hour clean electricity. So I think this helps a lot about the environment globally. So, lastly, I would introduce our local support in Australia. We have the highly experienced engineer, collection manager based in Sydney, providing daily support for GPS process. Also have the previous electorate head of collections, Mr. Alfred, to support us, to share more, advice for Sungrow. We keep close contact with AMO and NAS, local NASPS, and also we always keep various marketing activities like the workshops, training, and seminars. So in Australia, we have more than 20 staff based in Melbourne, Sydney, and Adelaide. So we can offer also the local operation and maintenance and after sales service. So we always give quick response within 24 hours. So that's all for my presentation. So welcome to Minister. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Terry. It's now my pleasure to introduce the Minister for the Environment and Energy in Victoria, Lily D'Ambrosio, who needs very little introduction, I'm sure, to all of you. She's been the Minister since 2014, since when Victoria had very little renewable energy, to today where just in spring at least, it's 29% coming from wind and solar all up, and plans, I'm sure, for a lot more. Thanks.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you very much, David, for your welcome. Very pleased to be here, of course, at this conference. And I want to begin by my own acknowledgements of the traditional owners of this land. They are the people of the Wurundjeri, and my respects go to all of their elders of the past, present, and emerging, and any who may be here amongst us today. Solar energy is central to our government's plan for a clean energy economy. And this, of course, just doesn't happen on its own. These things don't happen by accident. Our government's leadership on climate change and renewables has created the right environment for solar energy investors, developers, and innovators in the state. And today I wish to paint a clear picture of why Victoria is attracting international industry leaders to build their solar projects here. Over the past 7 years, Victoria has established itself as a leader nationally and globally in the development of clean energy. And this is due in large part to the depth and maturity of our renewable energy policy, which has attracted a roll call of international investment. Our first Victorian Renewable Energy Target auction, a reverse auction, brought forward 6 wind and solar farm projects that combined will deliver more than 900 megawatts of new renewable energy capacity. And our second varied auction is underway right now. These types of large-scale auctions, as I said earlier, just don't happen by accident. They happen because the right policy settings are in place. They happen because the right vision is in place. And our vision is very clear in Victoria. Through the Climate Change Act, which we legislated in 2017, we have made it our goal to achieve net zero emissions in Victoria by 2050. But more than that, it's about what do we do by 2030. And earlier this year, I announced our ambitious interim emission target to halve our emissions by 2030. This means that we will be decarbonising our economy at the fastest rate of any major jurisdiction in the country. But we're also providing the policy certainty that underlines to investors that Victoria is a secure place to invest. We set about legislated renewable energy targets. The first one for 2020 was a 25% renewable energy target, and we, as David has indicated, we have well and truly exceeded that. Some days we are generating 33% electricity here. Today it's around 29%. But of course, we are well on the way to achieving our 40% target by 2025 and ultimately a 50% renewable energy target by 2030. That'll create more than 24,000 jobs. And we are certainly leading the country when it comes to the creation of new jobs in the renewable energy sector. 30% of the nation's renewable energy jobs are here in Victoria. Today, we have 684 megawatts of large-scale solar farms that are built, commissioned and generating electricity, including the government-supported Bannerton and Numurkah projects, and 476 megawatts of large-scale farms under construction or in commissioning, including the government-supported projects at Winton and Kahuna. Glenrowan West Solar Farm was commissioned earlier this year and has the capacity to power 41,000 homes. The project managers of this project, Wersol Australia, are creating further benefits for farmers in the environment by allowing a large flock of sheep to graze the solar farm, keeping the sheep fed and the vegetation under control. So the point of this story is that there are many mutual benefits if done in the right way and engaging communities very early on in project development phase. It's these types of innovative approaches and large projects that are making Victoria the leading state for renewable energy projects in Australia. But of course, our state is not just about large-scale solar. Victorians also love, of course, their rooftop solar and the environmental benefits and cost savings that it brings to them. Our Solar Homes program, which we launched in 2018, offers rebates and interest-free loans to help even more Victorians get rooftop solar, solar hot water systems and batteries. More than 1 million Victorian homes, or around half the freestanding homes in the state, will have solar by the time this 10-year program finishes in 2028. More than 187,000 households and small businesses have taken advantage of rebates on solar panels, batteries and hot water systems through the Solar Homes program since it began. And since 2018, this program has supported thousands of Victorian solar jobs and saved households hundreds on their annual electricity bills. Just last month, I was delighted to have announced that thanks to the program, more than 1 gigawatt of additional solar PV capacity has been installed in Victoria. In addition, battery rebates have been taken up by almost 7,000 Victorian households. Since the Solar Homes program's inception, we've paid out more than $348 million in rebates and supported 5,500 jobs. All up, the program is worth $1.3 billion over 10 years. It's the largest solar homes program, if you like, in the country. We're also proud to be Australia's home of batteries. The 300 megawatt Victorian Big Battery in Moorabool is the biggest battery in the Southern Hemisphere. The battery will be fully operational very soon and has already been breaking records. During testing 2 weeks ago, it set a new Australian and possibly global benchmark when it discharged at its full capacity of 300 megawatts for the first time. This battery will store energy to power more than 1 million Victorian homes for half an hour, making it critical to ensure Victoria's energy stability. The battery builds on a number of other utility scale batteries we've delivered. The 30 megawatt battery in Ballarat and the 25 megawatt battery at the Gunawarra Solar Farm were both announced in 2018 as part of our government's $25 million energy storage initiatives. No large battery in the state that has been built has been able to be built without Victorian government support. The Ballarat battery was strategically located at a key intersection point in the electricity network to help stabilise the grid and maintain a reliable and affordable energy supply in Western Victoria. The Gunawarra system, at the time of its launch, the largest integrated solar farm and battery project in Australia, utilises its battery to store energy during the day for distribution into the grid at peak times after sunset. We're also delivering the Bulgana Green Power Hub in central West Victoria. We're also kickstarting the neighbourhood battery revolution. We're putting in $10 million into the Neighbourhood Battery Initiative, funding pilots and demonstrations of a range of neighbourhood scale battery ownership and operational models. In August, I announced 16 community, local council and industry projects across the state. They included $800,000 to the Yarra Energy Foundation for the construction of a neighbourhood solar sponge battery in Fitzroy North, and $150,000 to the Geelong Sustainability Group to determine the feasibility of establishing a series of neighbourhood batteries across Geelong. These storage projects will play a key role in unlocking even more solar energy capacity, both on rooftops and through large solar farms. So as we transform from a centralised fossil fueled energy network to a clean, modern and diversified system, our abundant solar resources make investing in our solar industry a very wise move. To make sure we continue to see solar thrive, we have plans for transmission upgrades that will unlock even more of these resources into the future. Our advanced manufacturing and supply chains also mean local suppliers are ready to support your projects. Future solar farms, particularly when paired with other generation technologies or storage systems, are another area of great potential for investors and developers. So Victoria is home to some of the world's top universities and research facilities, supporting a thriving energy research capability. And of course, Melbourne is one of the most livable cities, with many foreign companies choosing to base themselves here. So today I've had the opportunity to speak to people working and investing across solar, wind and renewable hydrogen energy sectors in one morning. It's a lot of work, a lot of people, but I'm joking. I'm seriously very enlivened to the prospect of stronger collaboration with business and industry investors with proposals to support our state. And if there's no other message that I want to leave with all of you today, is that the Victorian government is absolutely open for business. We want to, and we believe we have established a very thriving and a welcoming economy with policies that are right for the market to invest. And you can do that with confidence, knowing that you've got the right policy settings. So it is very exciting. It's a rapidly evolving space with enormous potential for us to cut carbon emissions, to lower energy prices and create economic benefits for all Victorians. So thank you very much for listening to me, and I look forward to those stronger collaborations to be developed over the coming period. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Minister D'Ambrosio. Good government, I'm sure, as we all know, consists of great policy and great execution. As a history student, as I once was, you come to realise that all the successful countries throughout history, if you read it closely enough, have a great bureaucracy that helps to make the whole thing happen. It's the execution, the interface between the market-driven economy and the policy settings that make the market work. And on that basis, I'd like to welcome Lynn Boeing, who's the Executive Director of Energy Projects and Programs at the Department of Environment, Land, Water and Planning.
Just get my iPad to recognise my face here. Doesn't know me without the mask on. So good morning, everybody. Thank you, David, for the introduction, and looking forward to an awesome session this morning. I too would like to acknowledge the Wurundjeri people as the traditional custodians on the land of which we're meeting this morning, and pay my respects to their elders past and present, and extend that respect to any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islanders who might be in the room today. It's a great pleasure to be here, to be participating in this conference. IRL, you would have been forgiven for thinking that we might never get back to this face-to-face environment given the challenges of last year. But here we are in 3D, bigger and better before, and isn't it awesome? We're a small audience, but we're clearly the cream of the crop when it comes to talking about solar energy futures. So it's great to see you here. I don't need to tell this audience that the outlook for the Australian solar market has never been brighter than it is now. Minister D'Ambrosio brought you up to speed on the extraordinary ongoing success of the Solar Homes program, a program that's near and dear to my heart, as I had a lot to do with it in the early days. She talked about the ever increasing renewable energy capacity that we're building across our state. She painted a clear picture on why Victoria is attracting industry and international industry leaders to develop solar projects here, and how the government's leadership on action and renewables has created the right environment for investment and innovation. I'd like to zoom in on a couple of projects and initiatives to help bring to life how we're supporting safe and sustainable energy futures for Victoria. I'm going to start with a regional initiative designed to provide opportunities for community and industry renewable energy projects in the Latrobe Valley in Gippsland. There's currently 5 projects that are being funded under the $3 million Latrobe Valley Energy Growth Program, including various solar and battery installations on community and sporting buildings. One of the most exciting projects, however, is being led by the Ramiak District Aboriginal Corporation for the construction of a 4.9 megawatt solar farm. The Ramiak District Aboriginal Corporation was established in 1992 to improve the social, health and economic outcomes for Aboriginal people in East Gippsland. The Ramiak Solar Farm will be the first on Aboriginal owned land in Victoria, empowering the local Aboriginal community to achieve self-determination by developing their own renewable energy generation. The project's expected to create at least 40 jobs during construction and 14 ongoing roles, as well as creating an income stream for the corporation. Through a project like Ramiak Solar Farm, Victorian Government is demonstrating its commitment to support Aboriginal participation in and adoption of new energy technologies. This commitment is further demonstrated by the Traditional Owner Renewable Energy Program, which aims to strengthen traditional owners' capacity and capabilities and support self-determination in the renewable energy transition. Announced late last year, the $1.1 million program made funding available to Victoria's 11 current registered Aboriginal parties to formulate strategies, to develop feasibility studies, and to deliver implementation projects to enable greater participation in the renewable sector and to build opportunities for long-term benefits to support self-determination. The funding will empower traditional owners to implement initiatives to harness the benefits from renewable energy in their local communities. The investment will also help traditional owners to lower business running costs and reduce emissions, as well as bringing immediate and long-term benefits to the corporation's direct members and visitors from the local community and abroad who will use the renewable energy sites for cultural, educational, tourism and business purposes. The Traditional Owner Renewable Energy Program is a foundational step in building the capability and capacity required to enable traditional owners to participate in Victoria's renewable energy transition. Moving from self-determination to innovation, I want to talk a bit more about batteries, and specifically neighbourhood batteries, which the Minister also touched on. As you would know, neighbourhood batteries are generally located close to where people consume and generate electricity and seek to fill the gap between the large-scale big batteries and the small resi batteries. They can improve the reliability of our electricity network and help to maximise the solar generation benefits as we move towards a safe and sustainable energy future. Neighbourhood batteries are an exciting way to support DER integration while delivering a wide range of benefits to consumers and to communities. That's why the Victorian Government has invested almost $11 million, as the Minister mentioned, including an initial round of $3.68 million for the 13 feasibility studies and 3 implementation projects. And those projects are led by community organisations, local councils and distribution businesses. And you can see in the slide on the top there, the location and distribution across Victoria of those neighbourhood battery projects. The ultimate aim of the initiative is to test a range of operational and ownership models to help us understand the potential role that neighbourhood batteries could play in the energy transition. Just to bring that to life a bit, an example of one of the projects is the trial of a 150 kilowatt, 388 kilowatt hour battery on the low voltage network to be delivered by Powercorp in partnership with Wyndham City Council, Simply Energy, and the Western Alliance for Greenhouse Action. The project will implement a neighbourhood battery solution in the suburb of Tarneit in Melbourne's west, which has among the highest solar installations in all of Victoria, with around 42% penetration.
Hi there, morning.
It will
let
support
me know if
around
you can hear
100
me.
homes. So the battery will help to integrate more solar generation, manage minimum and peak demand, and provide customers with access to new storage products. The battery will store locally generated excess solar, as I said, from around 100 homes during the day.
Yep, sure,
making
no
it
worries.
available during
Can you let me know
peak
if you
periods
if the mic's all right?
The Tarneit trial will focus on creating a sustainable commercial
With
model
me, I'm
that
not
delivers
sure if you
benefits
can
for both
just
customers and
hear
for
me
networks
properly.
through a network-owned neighbourhood battery. The outcome of the Tarneit trial and the other neighbourhood battery projects will help government determine which ownership and operational models provide the best value and benefit to Victorian customers, communities, and the electricity system. Outcomes will also inform the thinking on policy settings required to overcome barriers and to enable success. Turning from neighbourhood batteries to another exciting space, which is zero emissions vehicles. Victorian Government Zero Emissions Vehicles Roadmap outlines how the state will take full advantage of the global shift towards ZEVs as a key driver of safe and sustainable energy futures. Government has committed that 50% of all new light vehicle sales in Victoria will be ZEVs by 2030. At COP, the government also joined with many other jurisdictions in the world in declaring a target of 100% of car and van sales as ZEVs by 2035. The roadmap is supported by a $100 million package that will help Victoria achieve this goal, including an Australia First ZEV subsidy program, a zero emissions bus trial to support the transition of 100% of new buses to be ZEVs by 2025, and the rollout of charging infrastructure on major highways and key tourist destinations, and a fund to encourage the uptake of ZEV commercial vehicles. On Friday, the Minister made some additional announcements under the ZEV roadmap, including $3 million in grants to fund local council and business EV fleet charging infrastructure, as well as announcing the successful participants in the Destination Charging Across Victoria program. This program is providing $5 million to support 32 projects, which will install 141 public EV fast charging stations across Victoria at high use areas, tourist hotspots, including shopping centres, parks, community centres, libraries, hospitals, visitors information centres, as well as the Melbourne Zoo, the Queen Victoria Market, the Great Ocean Road and the MCG. And the map there shows the public charging infrastructure across Victoria, which is being enabled both through the DCAV program, as well as other previous Victorian government investments. So those announcements build on the great success of the ZEV subsidy program, which has had amazing uptake since it was launched in May, with Victorians introducing ZEVs in record numbers. Figures show that after the subsidy was introduced, ZEV sales jumped 77% in May and June compared to those from February to April. More than 1,500 Victorians have already taken part in the subsidy program, particularly in the West, with Point Cook and Truganina among the top suburbs for uptake. So through those actions, we're ensuring that Victoria remains the national leader in zero emissions vehicle uptake and that we're delivering on the commitments in this space. So it's been a really brief overview of some of the exciting projects and initiatives that we're undertaking in our journey towards a safe and sustainable energy future for Victoria. Through these programs and many others, we're ensuring that we're not only laying the groundwork for Victoria's future prosperity, but we're delivering real and immediate benefits to the lives of regional communities, including traditional owners, and making the promise of renewable energy into a reality for thousands of Victorians right now. Thanks, everyone. Any questions? So the Neighbourhood Battery Initiative is largely about front of the meter battery feasibilities and implementation studies. But there are a range of different operational models that we're looking at through various community groups that are leading projects and initiatives in that space. So we're looking at all sorts of different models to try and understand what will work best in terms of benefits delivered, both at a network level, electricity system level, but also importantly to consumers and to the communities that they operate in.
We've got a microphone here for anyone who wants to ask questions.
Vehicles of the home charging, big rooftop solar industry, got a aggressive policy on EVs that is likely to end up being owned by the taxpayer units. We're seeing from South Koreans cars that are coming out now with batteries that are 6 times, 7 times the size of their batteries. Technology that make people really happy.
I think anything's possible in this emerging market, I guess is what I would say, David. The focus in the first instance has been really trying to deal with that whole piece around range anxiety, which was identified as a key inhibitor to electric vehicle uptake. And so that's been the primary focus in trying to roll out EV charging infrastructure across Victoria so that people aren't concerned about that. And then obviously as the market continues to grow, we'll continue to look at what opportunities and requirements there are in terms of encouraging further uptake of EVs, which will certainly potentially incorporate the looking at the home. Yeah, absolutely. And the Minister touched on this there's been key announcements through the course of last year and this year about the development of renewable energy zones, and a large part of the goal behind that is to make sure that there is a more structured and forward-looking view in terms of how we plan for transmission infrastructure required to support the energy transition. So that's absolutely fundamental piece in terms of where we're making investments and rolling out projects to support what the future is going to look like and better connectivity for those renewable energy projects that are being built. Well, I think so, absolutely. I mean, with better planning comes better implementation, better outcomes. Thanks.
Hi, just doing a sound check now.
Lynn's presentation reminded me of just how exciting this energy vendor, to use a German term, actually is. The opportunities for so many places. I think within the solar side of things, we've really only started to touch on what's possible. I hope we can talk at some stage about topology and how, rather than how rooftop or behind the meter fits in with the grid, it's how the grid fits in with rooftop, which after all is growing much faster than any other part of the system. One of the most, the person I think the industry likes to talk to at the federal level, a great supporter of the industry and a great is Mark Williamson from the Clean Energy Regulator. And without me talking anymore, I'll hand over to Mark.
Thanks, David. Yep, I've got my slides, great. Look, thanks for this opportunity. For those who don't know us, we're a Commonwealth economic regulator with an environmental objective, and our purpose is accelerating carbon abatement for Australia. And we administer Australia's vibrant carbon markets and the schemes that underpin them, including the National Greenhouse and Energy Reporting Scheme, the Emission Reduction Fund and Safeguard Mechanism, and the Renewable Energy Target, or RET. And today I'm going to briefly talk a little bit about the RET, which is arguably being one of the most successful policies in terms of driving renewables and emissions reduction. But more importantly, some new policies which will provide a huge driver for renewables, including solar, and especially solar beyond the renewable energy target. So I'm going to briefly cover the small-scale renewable energy scheme and the large-scale renewable energy target. But more importantly, the Corporate Emissions Reduction Transparency Report was launched officially by Minister Taylor, a new policy that we're administering, and that is driving will drive enormous additional demand for renewables, and also Guarantee of Origin, a world-class assurance system. The policy paper is out, and it's proposed that we will administer that, and that will be an enormous driver for renewables, including solar. So going into those schemes. This is a slide borrowed from Andrew Blakers from ANU, and Australia has been putting on per capita additions of renewables higher than any other country in the world. Underpinned by our data, and I'll unpick this a little bit. So back in 2015, we just hit 1 gigawatt of additional renewables. We ramped it up quickly to over the 4 years, including this year, we'll be adding 6 gigawatts. These are all national figures. The NEM is about 87% of these figures. And our estimates are that next year, again, we'll average 6. I think it'll be a bit higher than that. I think it'll be next year around about 6.5 gigawatts. But the lumpiness of that average there is just the timing of when we accredited into the scheme utility scale build that caused the lumpiness. So this year we will average 30% total renewables, and the last quarter averaged 32%. I think my economic analysis team is underestimating that 32%. David will probably have a view, but I think it'll be more like 33, 34% average next year. So looking at and I'll just unpick this a little because it's important. The bottom slice is rooftop solar. So back in 2016, it was about 750 megawatts. This year we'll hit 3.2 gigawatts. If it wasn't for the lockdowns, the COVID lockdowns this year, it was on track to hit over 3.6 gigawatts this year. So I guess to put a prediction out there, I think if we don't get COVID lockdowns next year, and if the potential supply constraints for rooftop solar panels don't really bite, we could be on track for 4 gigawatts of rooftop solar. And Australia already has the highest penetration in the world. If you exclude high density apartments, it's 1 in 3 dwellings has rooftop solar. So the next slice up is utility scale solar. And it's only back in 2015, the ACT government contracted the little 20 megawatt Royalla, which was that time was the biggest solar farm in Australia. But rooftop utility scale solar has gone really strongly. On top of that is large scale wind, and wind will be very important in the mix, but solar is the big opportunity as prices get driven down large scale towards the government's target price for ultra low cost solar of $15 per megawatt hour. So phenomenal trajectory where added capacity is increased by a factor of ×6 from 2015 to the average was seen since 2018. And also since 2017, we've actually doubled the rate of renewables in the grid. So the Commonwealth is also underpinning, particularly through the Clean Energy Finance Corporation, around about $1.9 billion in some of the big interconnectors and pieces of transmission that are needed. And as David and others said already, it's all about the grid to unlock, to be able to launch it off that average of 6 gigawatts a year and to really drive it up. Now, for those who are not familiar, large-scale generation certificates, or LGCs, I'll talk briefly about this because it's an important foundation for the new policies I'll be talking about shortly. Very messy graph, but it's actually the kind of the line that's the greeny kind of one, the spot price. You'll see it ran up to well over $80 when everybody thought the target couldn't be met, the large-scale renewable energy target. And you get a certificate for every net megawatt hour of generation. The spot price for LGCs is currently around $40. Now, this year, we will probably see close to 40,000 gigawatt hours of generation large scale. The target was 33,000 gigawatt hours. David, you'll probably remember Kobad Bagnari from Bloomberg New Energy Finance predicted that once the target was exceeded, we'd see the spot price hit zero. It's a long way from zero and still averaging around $40. The critical thing is the kick up in this. If you look at the forward prices, so the Cal 22, which will be the number for next year, back in 2019, that's that dirty beigey mustardy color line, back in 2018, the markets thought that by next year, the certificate price would be $10 a megawatt hour. That Cal 22 has now come up to the spot price of about 40. So the market has fundamentally misunderstood supply and demand dynamics for LGCs. So that's a huge build signal still at $40 a megawatt hour, particularly where average wholesale prices are. So the two things the market has misunderstood is there's about $1 billion sitting in consolidated revenue that can be redeemed with the surrender of certificates within the 3-year rule. So there's a huge commercial incentive to redeem that 1 billion. So the market is really still in a deficit. But the other thing, and I'll show you this shortly, is there's a whole lot of voluntary ambition for renewables and cancelling LGCs that the market has misunderstood, and the new policies add to that. So I'm now going to go to those new policies. So firstly, Climate Active is the Commonwealth's carbon neutral scheme. And if you look at our quarterly carbon market reports, it is booming in terms of carbon neutrality and providing a big demand for Australian carbon credit units and LGCs. LGCs to prove you're using renewable energy to net off against those Scope 2 electricity emissions. Green power is booming again as well. So it's voluntary demand, cancelling LGCs to prove that retailers are genuinely selling green power. But what I'm going to talk a little bit about is Guarantee of Origin, which will be, the Corporate Emissions Reduction Transparency Report, or CERT. Minister Taylor launched that the other week. Again, it'll use a similar carbon accounting framework as Climate Active. So you can use Australian carbon credit units to offset your Scope 1 emissions. But your Scope 2 electricity emissions, it can be LGCs. So I'm now going to show you a short 30-second video. And in case you think I suddenly realised I'm in the wrong room and the hydrogen one is a few rooms down, but to prove clean hydrogen from electrolysis of water, you have to be able to trace all the large-scale renewables in and to prove that the inputs are renewables. So the Guarantee of Origin scheme, the policy paper is out. It proposes that alongside LGCs, there would be a Guarantee of Origin certificate for renewable energy for all the generation that doesn't get LGCs. So it's the so-called baseline generation in place when the scheme, the RET first began. And it's mainly the big hydro, Snowy and Tas Hydro. Those Guarantee of Origin certificates will be able to use proof of renewable energy. But more importantly, it proposes when the RET ends at the end of 2030, that all large-scale generation would get a Guarantee of Origin certificate for renewable energy. So there's that traceability and that pull factor for more renewables.
With our investment in low emissions technologies, including clean hydrogen, Australia is supporting the global switch to fuels and manufactured products that have little or no carbon footprint. Becoming a major producer and exporter of clean hydrogen is a priority for the Australian government. Underpinning our clean hydrogen future will be Guarantee of Origin, recognition of how and where Australian hydrogen is made, including the carbon emissions, energy source and production technology. The journey to establish a Guarantee of Origin is well underway. Trials will be held to inform our next steps. The Australian government is committed to building a robust global trade in hydrogen, and our Guarantee of Origin will assist Australian producers to trade globally. Scan the QR code for more information.
So this will also underpin the same type of framework as proposed beyond clean hydrogen for clean ammonia, clean aluminium, clean steel, clean anything. And that will be the really big pull factor for additional renewables, including solar. Just like LGCs are cancelled, these Guarantee of Origin certificates would be cancelled at the point of consumption of the physical product, whether that be hydrogen or renewable energy, aluminium or steel. So we have a wealth of information on our website. There's a longer video on Guarantee of Origin, a lot of information on our website and the Department of Industry, Science, Energy and Resources website. And our quarterly carbon markets report have a lot of information. Thanks. Look, it's a great question. Look, at the moment, the overall trend for the LGC price is slowly down, but at $40, it's still a really big price signal. Now, if the RET was going to finish at the end of 2030, you would probably see closer to 2030, the price getting very, very fragile. But this ramp up in corporate ambition that we're seeing, that we're helping to support through the CERT initiative, it's just going to be fascinating to see how supply and demand dynamics play out. I think we're going to see demand for LGCs increase at a rapid pace, and so that might be a very, very slow downward trend. What it becomes at the end of the RET, if Guarantee of Origin certificates for renewable energy are there, I don't know, but we will probably see before then, will we have solar down at that $15 a megawatt hour, or maybe even lower. So even a small dollar figure for Guarantee of Origin certificates still may provide a material de-risking of new projects, but time will tell. Great question, though.
Would you support using LGC to satisfy safeguards and viability?
Certainly, again, LGC data could be used for Scope 2 electricity emissions and safeguard facilities. In the King Review, it did talk about the potential for conversion rate between LGCs and ACCUs. The department's working on that. There hasn't been a policy paper come out of that as yet. But these will be fascinating carbon market developments to watch, I think.
Clean hydrogen means as covered by the Guarantee of Origin certificates?
Yes, firstly, the policy paper the department has put out talks about being well to gate as where the emissions would be measured. So if you're using renewable energy into electrolyzers, there would be a very small additional emissions, which could be some emissions embodied in the water that's used in the electrolyzers. So the potentially those could be offset by use of Australian Carbon Credit Units, ACCUs or LGCs, or it may be there's a very, very small emissions intensity. So the proposal is we would issue a certificate for every unit of production, a metric tonne, for example, of clean hydrogen, and it would be imprinted with the emissions intensity. Now, if you're making hydrogen through a steam reformation of gas, then if you're having some carbon capture and storage and some offsetting, you'll still end up with a much higher emissions intensity. But it is the proposal these guarantee of origin certificates would actually have the emissions intensity so the market can work out what it wants to buy.
Yes, go ahead. Hang on. Sorry. My apologies as chairman, but we're using microphones for questions for our online audience.
Hello, this is Hoy from Sangro, Australia. My question is this guarantee of origin, is it just an Australian initiative or is it a global thing? Are there other companies that are doing, other countries that are doing this?
Great question. The department is working internationally with large trading partners, including Singapore, Japan, South Korea, and parts of Europe. Yeah. We will be starting trials soon, so we'll be working with real players in Australia and with international trading partners. I think we're ahead of the world in terms of progress so far, but we have a lot of interest in countries who want to import our renewable energy embedded in clean everything, and they want a system with integrity. So the detail will be designed with trading partners.
Are there any financial benefit for us doing that?
For Australia?
For Australia, yeah.
Well, absolutely. There's an opportunity for Australian businesses. If we provide a world-class assurance system that proves the emissions intensity, that will underpin the commerciality of Australian businesses exporting. So the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade and Austrade are extremely excited.
I think we'll have to wind the questions up there. Mark's generally very available and knows his stuff, and so plenty of opportunities to catch up with Mark as time. Thank you, Mark.
Thanks, Dave. We're now moving to the first of our panel sessions today. No later now than we were at the start of the conference. So I'd like to welcome James Seymour, who's the CEO of the Centre for New Technology, who's going to moderate this first session, which is all about issues in the solar industry, of which, of course, there are many. Well, we're supposed to finish at 11:20, I think. So no later than let speakers. Yes, I don't know where have our speakers gone. Oh, we've got our online speaker. Sorry, I'll maybe.
My friends. So thank you very much for joining us today, and thank you for our speakers joining us online as well. We do have one speaker in the room, Adam, who's just going to join us in a moment up the front here as well. So thank you very much for being here, both online and in the room. Opportunities and challenges in the solar industry. Well, there's always lots. I reflect back when I started in solar, and it was it'll tell the time, but it was $6 a watt just for a panel at that time. So just the panel cost was $6 a watt. And I remember at the time being associated with one of the large retailers here, and we would have our end of year function, and we would talk about our solar sales, and we would talk about them by name. And that then grew to be the, at that time, I think they were the second largest installer and became the largest installer. But of course, we started moving on from kilowatts to hundreds of kilowatts to megawatts and tens of megawatts and so on. And that's something that's been a hallmark of this industry, has been through that time, there's been policy uncertainty, market uncertainty. but there's been remarkable resilience. There's been remarkable passion and drive in the industry to succeed. And I still see that very much today. And I'm just as excited about the future that's ahead of us. And the speakers that we've got here today are going to bring a bit more of a perspective here from not just, we've heard a bit of the Victorian examples here this morning. We also heard from Mark around the clean energy regulators' view of the overall market. And our speakers today transcend the entire Australian market from some of the smaller scale solar through myself, some of the larger scale utility solar, some of the services and sector-wide challenges that sit here as well that need to be tackled, not in looking at the solutions for today, but 5-10 years out and what those opportunities are. And so I'll read through each of our speakers and we'll introduce them. And then what our speakers are going to do is just give you a little bit of their background and a bit of their perspective du jour as they're seeing the challenges and opportunities for them at the moment. And then we'll go into some facilitated questions and we'd love you to chime in, please. So I'm James Seymour. I have the privilege of being the CEO of the Centre for New Energy Technologies, or C4NET, which is an organisation that is a member-based organisation, not for profit. And we look at the complex challenges of the energy transition and use collaborative research to address those. In particular, industry-led, data-enabled research. We have DNSP partners who support us very well, likewise with leading minds from universities, and we enable, we access data, largely smart meter data, to inform a lot of the transition challenges and enable that research at the distribution through to customer end. What I would like to do is actually introduce our first panelist now. And we're going to have Heidi Lee lead us off. Heidi's up above me here in the room. Heidi is CEO of Beyond Zero Emissions, BZE, which will be an organisation familiar to many of you. It's an independent think tank that has been producing climate change solutions for over a decade. Last year, its economic recovery initiative, the Million Jobs Plan, was one of the most widely covered clean technology reports published, and it's one that I highly commend to you. This year, its research focuses on renewable energy industrial precincts and how we can set Australia up to be a clean exports powerhouse in a global zero emissions economy. This time last year, BZE were announced that they had won the Best International Climate Change and Environment Think Tank. And Heidi, as CEO of BZE, is then very well placed to speak to us now. So please welcome Heidi.
Thank you very much for including me in this fantastic event. I am deeply regretting getting a mild cold because that keeps you out of every public space these days, but it's wonderful to be here online and to join you virtually. So Beyond Zero Emissions are an independent think tank. We're not connected to an institution, a research institution, a university, or a political party, which means that our funders, funded by philanthropy, mandate that all we do is look for opportunities to rapidly decarbonize the economy, and central to doing that work, of course, is building out massive amounts of new renewable energy. Our work on renewable energy industrial precincts has really built on our 2018 publication, which was led by Michael Lord, called Electrifying Industry. And that's where we looked at 5 all electrical industrial pieces of equipment, everything from heat pumps to electrolyzers. And we looked at how that could decarbonize Australia's most important industrial processes, the food industry, the aluminium, hydrogen, steel, and of course, beer. And we took that research there and looked at how we could apply those solutions in regions where they're going to be the hardest hit by a transition away from fossil fuels. Now, fossil fuels are incredibly important to Australia and have been for a number of decades, but they are also facing a rapid decline, and one that we are not in control of. We can export as much fossil fuels as we like, but we need customers, and all of our trading partners have committed to zero emissions targets in the next little while, and they're implementing policies to actually achieve them. But there's great news for Australia, and I think great news for the solar sector in those announcements as well, because we sit here right now with an enormous opportunity. As well as those fossil fuels that we're exporting, we're also exporting raw commodities that will be central to what comes next in terms of renewable energy technology, batteries, storage, transmission lines, and all the good stuff that's going to be part of this transition. Our challenge is, of course, to build out new renewable energy at a pace that enables us to capture these markets and build value chains onshore that help us set ourselves up for success as what in the future. Now, I think that's my 5-minute intro there. So I'll pass back and look forward to questions from the audience.
Thanks a lot, Heidi. The next person I'd like to introduce is Alejandro Cantos, who is an industrial engineer by background, and he is the head, the Australian Asia Pacific head of PV hardware. Now, Alejandro then brings an international flavour to this as well, but by working for a global organisation with a strong commitment in Australia. They've already backed 10 large solar farms in the country, 1.1 gigawatt worth of active structures, and the company it represents products such as single and dually linked single axis tracking systems, multi-row and fixed tilt structures. So with a lot of exposure to those really large projects that are there. But Alejandro will also bring in the parent company's perspective here and how Australia is positioned globally compared to some of the other opportunities that they see as well. The company has some exciting opportunities that they're pursuing here, and I'll hand over to Alejandro to speak more about those.
Thank you so much, James, for the introduction. It is a great honor to be here with you today, very much surrounded with the very best of our industry. And it is true, we've been here since 2017. We are taking part of one of the most challenging projects here in Australia. We want to also bring our flavor and expertise from Europe and other parts of the world to help the industry to succeed. We have some ideas. We are very engaged and working closely with regulators. And we would like to be seen not only just a tech provider, but also a solution provider in all the renewables space. We belong to a larger conglomerate called Grand Solar. We are very active in not only in the tech manufacturing of the equipments, but we also operate in development. We also operate in the EPC side. And we have our own engineering and our own patents, R&D laboratories, very much engaged with government bodies, looking forward to get new solutions across the line. Some of the challenges we have faced here in Australia, we can talk about the VRED one that is happening in Victoria. We were the only ones building our equipment with almost 100% Australian steel. That has been, for me, one of my best prides. I feel very honored to be part of that project. We look forward to new solutions as well in that space, and look forward to an insightful conversation with my work colleagues. Thank you so much.
Thanks very much, Alejandro. And next we'll go to our last online speaker in Cam Ho. Cam is the Managing Director for Australia of Total Eren, a global renewable energy independent power producer with over 3.5 gigawatts of assets in operations. In Australia, Total Eren owns and operates Victoria's largest wind farm, 256 at Kiamal, and is developing over 1 gigawatt of renewable energy projects. Total Eren has a strategic partnership with Total Energies, the 6th largest energy company with the global energy company, with an objective to invest in over 100 gigawatt of renewable energy capacity by 2030 and net zero carbon by 2050. Cam, thanks very much for joining us. I love the picture behind you there. So please, you've got the floor.
Thanks, James. Just a minor correction, there's actually 256 solar farm, which is at Kymore, not the wind farm. So obviously, you know, we will be looking at wind developments globally as well. So again, morning everyone, and apologies I couldn't attend in person. It would have been great, obviously, to join the conference in person after I think 6 months of delay. So look, obviously, Total Eren, you know, we build, we own, we operate renewable energy capacity globally. We've got 30 people in Australia across the full spectrum of projects. Our ambition is to try to fuel the next, you know, round of growth beyond the renewable energy target policies here in Australia. Very much focused on the corporate PPA sector and also off-grid and mining as well. We do see significant opportunities of growth in Australia. At the same time, we've gone through significant challenges as well with the delivery of you know, solar farms in the last 2 years with system strength issues and you know, new curtailment MLF as well. But you know, we are genuinely excited about the Australian market, and we do believe that, you know, we will have a lot of new projects to bring online in the next couple of years. So definitely be happy to hear from fellow panelists and also the audience as well.
Excellent. Thanks a lot, Cam. And our last speaker, who's keeping me company up here on the stage. Thank you, Adam. Adam is the country manager and director for all Lightsource BP's projects and investments in Australia. Previously, Adam worked a number of years at AGL Energy and APA Group in various roles that included developing and acquiring wind and solar farms, energy wholesaling and retailing, energy emerging technologies, and renewable energy strategy. And Adam brings a really interesting perspective of, again, that global player partnering in the local economy, and comparing those opportunities to what they see overseas and what the global partner's been able to bring. So I'd like to hand over to Adam.
Yeah, thank you, and thanks for having me. Yeah, I too see a lot of opportunity in the Australian market. And just a brief history on Lightsource BP, we started out in 2010, hitting the feed-in tariff in the UK. We delivered over 350 projects and grew to be one of the largest in Europe. And then BP came along and in its transition plans acquired 50% of the business. And what that's allowed us to do is to expand into 16 different countries, including Australia. And we entered Australia in 2018. We had an early win with the Snowy PPA, and we built the Wellington Solar Farm, and we've got 2 other solar farms under construction at the moment. So we've got over half a gig with more than 1.5 gigs in the pipeline. And we also have a renewable hydrogen project over in WA, which we're developing with BP. Lightsource BP is going to do the renewable energy solution, and BP will do all the electrolyzer and marketing and supply chain stuff, as it has been doing for a number of years in other products. So with BP, we've been able to accelerate our development, and globally now we have a target of 25 gigawatts by 2025. When we came to this country, we had a target of 1 gigawatt. And we've just recently doubled that to 2 gigawatts by 2025. So there's a lot happening in the company, and it's really exciting. There's obviously a lot of challenges, and happy to talk about some of those. But I think it's a really exciting time, particularly with the market being led by business and industry and others.
Okay, well, maybe we'll start with a couple of those challenges. And Adam, I might come to you first, and then we'll work through the other panelists as well. But for you, looking out there and with a near term, so next year or two, and then beyond that, sort of challenges that you're seeing that you'll have to overcome the sector has to overcome, and any insights as to how you can see that happening?
Yeah, well, I suppose a couple come to mind. There's some supply disruptions happening at the moment in the panel market for panels that are coming out of China, but we see that as a fairly short-term disruption, and you know, hopefully by this time next year that would have made its way through the system. There's obviously grid challenges, and that's been a challenge for a number of years now in Australia, but it's just something that we have to factor into our development plan. It does take a long time to get a grid application through, but you know, we've been very cognizant at Lightsource BP to pick strong parts of the network, and so far we've avoided the pitfalls that others unfortunately have found. But you know, there is plans to accelerate the rollout of those transmission connections, strengthening the network. I think you know, brings opportunities with you know, things like storage, whether it's pumped hydro or battery storage, and other things that can support the network. They're probably the key ones. I mean, obviously in the near term, I think everyone's got their mind on what's happening in May next year with the election. And I think David mentioned in his opening speech that the government has missed a bit of an opportunity here to do more with the current scheme, which is the LGC scheme, and which is something that we all know and we've all lived with for a long time. And the systems are in place. It's been very effective. There's no reason why you couldn't extend that scheme out and use that as a tool to get to net zero by 2050.
Okay, there's a few things there that we might pick up on as we go through. But what I might do is just go to Cam then to build in. Cam, given that we just raised those transmission challenges and the opportunity there, we also used to have the you know, the MLF used to be a frequent challenge, but actually now it's getting a little more complex and everything. So how have you been experiencing that in the projects and proposals that you're looking at?
Yeah, I think, you know, from our side, we've screened a lot of projects in the market, and you know, we've sort of declined investment in probably 95% of them due to a lot of the issues around, you know, grid and network stability aspects. You know, from an MLF perspective, I do think that the industry's learned a lot in the last 2 to 3 years, and you know, as investors, we've just factored a lot of that into account. So I think MLF is something the industry can sort of manage to a large extent, but it's probably the disruptions from a supply side of generation itself. I think, you know, we do see a lot of negative pricing rolling in the next sort of, you know, 18 to 24 months. And that's something, obviously, the uncertainty hangs with any potential additional intervention into the market from a government perspective that's putting a lot of new generation just at the moment, pretty anxious about it. So I think, you know, from my side, it's investors have learned to model MLF in a more conservative manner. I think, you know, from a network upgrades perspective, you know, we definitely see, for example, the New South Wales and Victoria and the Queensland governments with the renewable energy zones, fantastic initiatives to foster an environment, you know, where they're trying to corral projects to work together. I think that would be fantastic when it's all fully implemented. So I think it's all headed towards the right direction, but that longer term policy, if it's just genuinely a free market, keep it as a free market. If not, you know, I think Adam's suggestion of an extending of the RET is such an easy way of creating, you know, just a long-term vision for the country to work towards.
Excellent. And Alejandro, like from that perspective of bringing projects in Australia compared to global, your other opportunities around the world. And I know you focus very much on the Australia and Asia Pacific, but you have an insight in there around globally as well. What are those challenges that you see that you would love to see overcome, that we need to overcome in order to have a clearer pathway there?
Well, it is very curious, but during the last 6 months, we have suffered what we call a monopolistic situation in terms of manufacturing. well, in Spain, we realize how important is vertical integration in order to overcome projects. And we decided to be brave and remain with our own ownership of our manufacturing facilities. We open facilities the closest possible to the projects because we knew that interdependency of logistics or sourcing of material can be damaging in terms of the financial modeling. Every single week that a solar farm is not producing, not only a solar farm, every renewable project that is not producing cost money. And we are at the bottom of the pyramid because we suffer all the financial stress and all the project pressure that is, from the above level. So developers, consultants, EPCs. So at the end, and you need to be mindful that 70% of the EPC contract comes into the tech providers. So at the end, for us to be lean and to be able to deliver at the cheapest possible price with the highest quality and very quickly is crucial. So we took the brave step to keep our own manufacturing facilities, and that has given us the edge during these 6 months by delivering 2 projects and very complex projects that most of our market partners could probably say, well, that's really impossible. And we did it. So I encourage to all our work colleagues to look for different options. And definitely Australia has a lot of potential to come across different solutions to make the market more attractive. I would like to tell you a lot more, but the time is short. But I will leave it there for now.
Well, just quickly, if you could touch on with the local supply challenge. So, and I'm actually talking about the local content for your material and everything here, because that's a bit of an opportunity as well. You had to overcome it with one recent project. What do you see as the prospects there as we look out?
Okay, so Victoria has been very brave by putting in place these VRED auctions. I think they are at the very front lead of what it could be a future business model for Australia. Australia is strategic because all the main mineral components of all the equipments are actually sourced and exported from Australia. When you think about the footprint, it doesn't make too much sense to send iron ore to somewhere else to get steel coming back. And we are all about maintaining this footprint, this carbon footprint, the shortest possible. So with the right implementation, it just takes a little bit of goodwill and a good brain. And I think in Australia, we have good brains and goodwill and good politicians. And just with 10 pages regulation, something similar to the ITC model, the investment tax credit, but making it the Australian way, local investment tax credit. If you purchase an equipment that has a percentage of raw material coming from Australia, you will have a tax relief during the O&M cash flows. That will help the developers, that will help the EPCs, and that will bring a fair price for us as a manufacturer, as per the highest standard, Australian standard, and also the quickest way possible because it will be manufactured here. This is my point of view.
And that's a great segue into some of the work that Heidi's been doing then as well. So we're around that local manufacturing operations. But what people were saying, you were talking about the international demand and where people are setting that benchmark for us to hit, Heidi. What do you see those opportunities are for us to exploit?
Well, I think bridging together and really looking at the challenges presented by everyone who's spoken before me, when we can take first of all, let's align Australia's climate strategy with our global trading partners. That we think is that macro step that needs to be taken so that we are actually positioning ourselves with the biggest market opportunities, which are not domestic. They are the global trading partners that we already have, and those relationships that we can build on in a decarbonising world, not just a decarbonising Australia. But decarbonising Australia is incredibly important. When I talked about renewable energy industrial precincts, BZE, we do what you see other think tanks do. So we write those reports and we do those studies that look at quantifying what that opportunity is. But we also work hand in hand with local businesses and local communities to help bring their perspectives into that research and making sure that we're authentically representing what the local opportunities are. So those renewable energy industrial precincts, we're working in 2 locations at the moment, in Gladstone in central Queensland and in the Hunter, in Hunter Valley in New South Wales. So we've done our modelling because we're a think tank. So we looked at what the jobs and the revenue opportunities are. That is in the order of 34,000 new local jobs by 2032 in the Hunter, and around $11 billion in revenue, new revenue into that region. The opportunity in Gladstone is around 11,000 local jobs and $2 billion in new revenue by 2032. They're huge numbers, but those jobs, those opportunities are underpinned by more than 50 gigawatts of new renewable energy coming online. So we think that strategies and policies like the renewable energy zones that we're seeing most successfully in New South Wales, but also rolling out across the country, are critical to that. But we need to overcome this chicken and egg situation where we have supply coming online here and demand coming online there. We need to be coordinating that and making sure that our deployment of new renewables, of transmission line upgrades, of securing our grid and storage, that is happening in lockstep with the demand side. So we need to be decarbonising our existing industries, but also planning for the expansion of those industries so that you can make your solar panels here, so that you can recycle those, utility scale batteries here, so that we can make batteries to decarbonise our transport. That's what we'll be rolling out, more studies that looking at quantifying what size of new opportunities are on the table when we look at taking a wholesale transition of those other sectors to renewable energy as fast as possible, 10-year maximum. We'll be looking at that over the next 12 months. But right now, we need to be planning and coordinating new renewable energy in the order of 50 gigawatts to take advantage of these export opportunities in the Hunter and Gladstone alone. Our plan for renewable energy industrial precincts is for 14 locations around Australia. Granted, Hunter and Gladstone are 2 of the biggest ones, but there are many other places that can benefit from this. And in doing this, in actively pursuing these opportunities, we can help to show that there's an exciting future for places that are currently depending on fossil fuels for their livelihoods. These are communities that have this identity as, the energy backbone of the state system or of the national economy. You can retain that and transition to renewables and decarbonise the grid. But we need to be doing this in a really coordinated way, and that alignment from top to bottom is what matters the most.
So we might come back to that alignment a bit, because that's a key question that's come through, or key issue that's come through on a few things there. But I'd like to just link that demand side. So we're just talking around that international demand that's driving there. And I wondered if Cam or Adam may comment on what's driving that local demand. So Heidi was sort of saying there's an opportunity to coalesce around major manufacturing zones and regenerate them with renewables, but quite close to it. We know that those international partners, we talked about the alignment with the market need there and around what they're demanding. What are we seeing around demand in the Australian market, and what's driving that demand? Adam, do you want to have a...
Maybe just to carry on from the fantastic work that Heidi's doing, there is a real opportunity to create industries and jobs on the back of our fantastic renewable energy resources. So one example that we're doing overseas in America and Colorado, we're building a 300 megawatt solar farm that is supplying a steel mill, and that steel mill has pledged to be 100% renewable by 2040. So our 300 megawatt plant is the first renewable megawatts to go into that as it decarbonizes. Now, there's a huge opportunity in Australia to do similar things like that, to get value add to our natural resources that we currently put on a boat and ship. As is hydrogen, hydrogen medium long-term fuel from, the best solar resource and some of the best wind resource in the world should be low cost, and we should be very competitive in that export market. But there's other industries, we've spoken today about electric vehicles and mobility. With the right market and policy settings, there's endless opportunities.
Excellent. And Cam, maybe with a bit of exposure to those, the more remote sites and everything as well, and the opportunities that are there, this green manufacturing or the green element that comes into there to support, in other words, the renewables to support those. How is that a key driver for you, or is it more the corporate PPAs, or is it corporate PPAs within that's driving that demand for you?
I think it's a mix of both, James. I think one of the interesting part is that, renewable energy was traditionally seen as just purely within grid connected, utility scale, strictly remaining within the, electricity sector. What we're trying to move renewables out of now is into hydrogen, because hydrogen allows us to play a bigger role to decarbonize the rest of the economy. So that's one aspect, which is, really driven by the hope and the vision that renewables will get to, the magical price of $15 a megawatt hour by the end of the decade. In the mining sector, what we do see is that it's right now at this moment, renewables has come down from a price, but also from a reliability perspective has earned the trust of a lot of the mining organizations. So we do think that, we're at a point where we will see a lot of the off-grid mines, move towards renewable, because they don't have to worry about supply chain because it's all on site. And I think that's a wonderful aspect of renewables in that market. But, coming back to hydrogen, for us, we are quite excited about it because you're converting it to a different product, a product that you can store, a product that you can use from manufacturing, use, in terms of agriculture, conversion to green ammonia to decarbonize the food that we grow. So these are the things that, we are previously 2, 3, 4 years back, it just seemed impossible. But today, for us as Total and TotalEnergies, we're building electrolyzers as part of biorefinery plants, refinery plants in France, powered by solar PV. And that's really starting at sort of 60 megawatt scale with the intent to, increase to 10, 15, 20 gigawatts by the end of the decade to really deploy a product in which, 15, 20 years ago, we did not think was, could exist on an economic basis.
And Alejandro, while we've got so we've got this changing market, we've got this, those opportunities that Cam just mentioned there. So not only into the direct market, so driven by electric vehicles and everything, as we were, and the electrification of everything that we're sort of the journey that we're upon. We've got the solar to support green hydrogen and other elements, but what about direct solar for the world? Just exporting solar for the world.
Exactly right. This is a good point, great point. Basically, it's a natural step. What renewable sector is doing is more or less mirroring the same pathway that the LNG and gas sector has followed. Now we've got massive pipeline networks, intercontinental pipeline networks. And when you think about the subsea cables to transfer electricity from a country to another, they are not bigger than that. Actually, they are smaller than that. So if we have been able as a human race to achieve that, why cannot we do this with a less challenging technology from the execution point of view? And this is actually happening right now. It was very common to see in the Borneo Island a transfer of electricity between the hydros, between Brunei, Kalimantan, and Sarawak. So if this is happening in Asia Pacific, in a less developed environment or market, what cannot be achieving here in Australia with a proper regulation in place, as Adam said. I think with the right framework, Australia has all the potential to leverage a lot of electricity and probably open the door for a huge export market, as Sun Cable is right now trying to achieve with Singapore. So the opportunities are there for us to grab them, but also in the same way that Heidi said, this expansion needs to be regulated. And by taking a strong thinking, how can we do this, taking the maximum benefit for the next generations? Because it's not only about having a greener future, it's also about having and providing long-standing career opportunities for our future children. This is my point of view.
Thanks very much. I'm conscious that we've now heard from all of them. We've heard around some of the challenges and the opportunities that exist there. I'd like to just give an opportunity to see if there's any questions in the room. I'm conscious that we're pushing up against time a little bit here. So is there anyone who would like to ask a question of any of our speakers?
I'll ask a question if I could then. This $15 target, you know, from what I understand, OPEX is $10 or $15, you know, and has in fact been going up because connection costs have been variabilized rather than being fixed cost. You know, if operating cost per megawatt hour is $10 to $15, doesn't leave an awful lot of room for capital cost, does it?
Well, I'll try and answer that one, but that's right. I mean, but nothing will surprise me in this industry. I mean, you look at the PPAs that were written in the 2000s, where they are now, and you know they've more than halved now. Could they halve again by 2030? You know, maybe. I mean, you also have got, you know, battery storage, pumped hydro storage. You've got wind interacting with solar to provide a more reliable, firm electricity source that's completely carbon free. So does it need to get $15? Probably not, but it, you know, it's a number that someone came up with. Why not have a crack at making it work?
Did anyone else want to comment there? No. So, and Adam, we might take another question here, and then I might follow up on that with a question for you as well around how to price in that uncertainty. So we spoke about MLF and everything before, but we're seeing curtailment and everything and the impacts that that's having there for operators. So we'll come to that in a moment. Just the gentleman here.
Yeah, sure. There's been discussion about transmission lines this morning, and network strength. I'd just be interested in a panelist's opinion about the way forward with that. What's the best model to get that stuff happening quicker?
Who'd like to take that?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, James. I'll tackle that one. I think, you know, the various industry groups have obviously voiced, you know, its interest in helping to incentivize and also help, you know, the government plan where renewable energy projects, you know, would benefit the industry. And I think a lot of the various initiatives around the renewable energy zones that's announced, you know, it's really an outcome of that sort of, you know, the last 2 years of lobbying with the government and AEMO. And AEMO's, you know, long-term sort of ISP provides that framework as well. I think the challenge we have is that, you know, the current regulatory framework for once in a 60-year build is not exactly fit for purpose. It's the regulatory investment test isn't designed for projects of this scale, you know, nation building projects. So on that basis, you know, I do think that we're going to need to work with industry a bit more to see how we can, you know, help co-fund and put in that sort of infrastructure to really get, you know, a large build out of renewables in the gigawatts being planned in the various reses into the market.
And I think to like back that in 100%, Cam, I agree entirely with what you're talking about. We think that if you can take a precinct-based approach to the demand side, you can start to target those areas much more coherently. So find those locations where you've already got the reses, but then actually overbuild that. We need to be bringing on a lot more new renewables if we're going to have a manufacturing sector that enables us to have these onshore value-adding processes. So we really need to be first setting our sights high on what we can do with large amounts of new renewables onshore, identifying what those upper limits are on the generation side, and then actually planning to build that scale of new infrastructure, of those transmission lines and storage in a way that enables this to happen in lockstep. So I think the main concern that we would have around where the government is currently, where lots of governments are currently with their thinking, is that we're working around the edges of the energy market instead of taking a new page and looking at what kind of future we need to have, what are we aiming for ultimately when it comes to Australia playing a role in a global decarbonisation journey, and sizing our system, our energy infrastructure to meet that challenge and that opportunity, not just look at going like for like with what we've already got.
And I would actually add that in a bit of a play on words on that playing around the edges, actually there's a lot of opportunity around the edges as well. So while there are the major transmission challenges, there are massive amounts of solar going in at rooftops. And that is where there is an opportunity to really optimize within the distribution systems, and also the technology opportunities of what's happening there with power electronics and everything, and the ability to solve at that point of use and point of generation is very, very high. And it's not one or the other, it's a mix of all of those. Just before we go to any more questions, Adam, just that question there on the issue of curtailment, issue of the minimum demand events that are coming through and the impact that we're seeing there and the predictability of those. Is that just another market factor that you factor in, or are there things that could be done there that could actually help longer term?
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly we factor them into our economics when we're developing projects. There's two types of curtailment. There's the economic curtailment, which, there's something like solar. Yeah, storage will help that in those negative price periods where you're storing the electricity and using it in other periods of the day. On technical curtailment, coming back to what Cam and Heidi were saying, with the right market and policy settings, capital will flow here. There's a huge amount of appetite from investors around the globe, whether ESG, banks and funds have committed to spend a huge amount of money on renewables. They're looking for a home. There's a lot of capital looking for a home, and Australia is a great place to invest. We're an OECD country. We're well known. Our policy hasn't always been right in renewables, but if you get that right, the funds will flow. And what that happens is the cost of electricity comes down for all the consumers.
Any more questions from the floor?
Yeah. Good morning, everyone. I'm Alex Hong from Jinko Solar. So Adam said the challenge for him is the supply chain. So there is a good news from our side. The supply chain is getting better. So
I'll get your number after.
Yeah, okay, thank you. So we all know that developing or constructing a solar farm in Australia is not easy. The PPA price is very low, and grid connection is always challenging. And then recently is about the supply chain. While at the same time, we can see the Lightsource BP and Total Eren really did a good job. For example, the Lightsource BP in the past 3 years has already built up, constructing 3 projects in the row, all of which are all, large-scale utility projects. So my question is for Adam and Kim. Within your organization, how do you overcome those challenges, and how can you be very successful? What is the secret behind? Thank you.
We might go to Cam first on that one.
Yeah, Thanks, James. Thanks for the question. I mean, I don't think there's any secret to it. I think it's just ultimately it's a risk that we have to analyze and we take on. Definitely the volatility in the capital cost of building renewable energy projects in Australia has been an extreme challenge, to say the least. I think it's not one that we, though we have a presence in 21 countries globally, it's really much unique to Australia, where you have, you know, grid risk, market risk, construction risk, that is just, you know, very specific to Australia. So on that basis, you know, what we've done is build a very strong team locally. You know, we have 30 people in Melbourne and Adelaide to manage the projects that we develop, that we build. Economics are tight, but they're tight globally. We're, you know, renewables is no longer a small industry. You know, we've got asset funds coming in, whereas previously they would only prefer de-risk projects. But, you know, again, there's a lot of capital available in Australia with the right policy setting. If we want to get to, you know, $15 a megawatt hour by the end of the decade, that requires a lot of close collaboration across, you know, development, design, procurement, supply, all the way through the long-term funds. But, you know, we do believe that though there's negative pricing today, which is it's a material issue, you know, power can't be free, not forever, because then industries will come and they will build because power is so cheap. So it will eventually stabilize, and that's sort of what we factor in. But, you know, from our views that, you know, it's a risk that we take as an independent power producer to analyze and to effectively, you know, make sure that we can manage our assets safely and you know, profitably.
Yeah, very similar thoughts. You know, we've done the same thing. We've built a very strong team down here in Australia, but we also leverage our global footprint. So we centralize our procurement out of London and Madrid, and our technical center of excellence out of Madrid, where they're looking at projects all around the world, whether it's the US or Australia or Spain. And we continuous improvement. So we're getting, every time we build a new project, we get learnings from other jurisdictions as well as Australia. So it's very competitive, and you just need to be at your best, really, to grow.
So look, with that, we'll thanks, Adam. We'll need to wrap this session up. It was telling in just even preparing for this session that I actually struggled to get any of the challenges out of our speakers, because we've got a real opportunity mindset here, opportunity focused mindset. And that's something that I've always loved about the solar industry. And I see it just as much. We've even seen it with the organizers of this conference, just persisting and persisting until we actually all managed to get in a room together. Would you please join me in thanking our speakers, Heidi, Cam, Alejandro, and Adam? And thank you very much for joining us today.
Thanks. We're breaking for coffee now. Back here in about 10 to 12 minutes, please. Thanks.
Thanks, man. Yeah, no, that was good.
Hello, can you hear me? The music going?
Sorry, I could hear you.
I can hear you, Simone. There's all this music in the background.
Background noise there, so I can hear you.
I'll have to get the headphones. If you want me to get the headphones, I'll have to just pop out and get the headphones. Or is that better?
Oh, it's perfect right now. At least for me. I will let Zoe speak. Let me shut up and let Zoe speak.
I guess I'm trying to, there's a lot of music in the background. I'm just trying to talk over the top of it.
Yeah, it's sounding a little better now. So it's probably actually okay. We're running about 10 to 20 minutes behind from our last session. I'll let you know.
Okay, come back in a few minutes.
Yeah, Samad, just before you go away, what I actually get to do
Zoe, it's very difficult to hear you. I'm on the side. What you're saying.
is that better now?
Yes.
Perfect. What I'm going to get you both to do is just if you, when you hover over your own picture, there's 3 little dots in the top corner, and then there is a bit that says rename. If I can just get you to put your first and last name in there, just so that the audience in the room can, know exactly who you are, and they can follow along really easily that way. Amazing. Thanks, Laurie. Yeah, perfect. Amazing. Yeah, so we're running a little bit behind. They're just about to go on break. But yeah, I'll make sure to give you plenty of notice in the chat before we're going to make you live. Awesome. Thanks, guys.
we get everyone back in? I'd like to kick off again. Second quarter. Just to turn down here in Victoria. We're now moving to the second of our panel sessions this morning, which is industrial leaders gathering opportunities and challenges. Sorry, I'll get that right. The Australian regional trend going off the grid, solar in remote communities and industries. One of the, not my panel, but I do think that in Australia, one of the fantastic opportunities that we're only at the beginning of is to reconfigure the topology of the grid so that it works from the local area up to the big area with all these grid-forming inverters, and we can have a far more distributed system. And the off-grid area, it seems to me, has been showing the way in that, and I expect to hear a lot more about that. But to lead this panel, we've got Sally Corderman, who's well known, I think, as part of KPMG, long background. Over to you, Sally, if you want to.
Well, thank you very much for that introduction. It's so lovely to have all of you here. It is my pleasure to have this discussion on the role of off-grid and the conversations to have around that decision. It is a fascinating topic, and I guess given the session that James Seymour just held before this session, we know that this market in some sense can be seen as a knee-jerk reaction to the grid connection. Having said that, it's what we're here today is to really explore what the panelists know around why we are pursuing off-grid. And amazingly, we've seen that, for example, globally, this is about a $1.75 billion market projected to grow to up to 11 billion. So there's a lot of liquidity and a lot of interest, and certainly a lot of finance behind these investments. In Australia, of course, we're always slightly lagging behind in some of these innovations, and roughly we know that about only 2% of consumers are off-grid. But again, the numbers are quite compelling, and there are some projections that show that this could be up to 2 gigawatts, and equating to something like a $4 billion investment market. Today, we have a diverse panelist from all around Australia, actually. And the topic that we're exploring is, how much is there in the off-grid market, and how much opportunities and challenges that we're seeing. So what I might do is just invite each panelist to introduce themselves. And I might just go to those who are joining us remotely. So please, Laurie, over to you.
Oh, good morning. Yes, my name is Laurie Currow. My role is Head of Power Systems at Horizon Power in WA. I guess I look after a diverse engineering team that looks after the remote area power supplies, amongst which, standalone power systems and other microgrid type of power supplies.
And Laurie, could you answer the question? Do you think that the off-market space is simply here as a knee-jerk reaction to the complexities in grid connection, or do you believe that this is a standalone opportunity on its own?
Oh, look, I think it's the intersection of a couple of things. One, the cost of building networks in remote areas in our case is increasing, but also very much so driven also by the intersection of renewable energy appetite by consumers, and the cost of renewable energy coming down. In some areas, it's not coming down as quickly as we'd like to, like batteries, but certainly PVs and other components are certainly coming down. I think it's the intersection of those two things that is really causing the drive at the moment. For us, we also had the opportunity when we had a bushfire, unfortunately, burnt down several hundred poles. So therefore, it just was a no-brainer to really, use off-grid power supplies. But there is a huge opportunity here because the level of scale, the economies of scale aren't there yet, and we haven't quite got to a plug-and-play type of approach. And so I think once we start going down that path, and with locally produced components, so I think it'll get even bigger.
Very interesting. We'll turn to you. Samed. Samed, please introduce yourself to our audience today, and your comments on what the role of off-grid in the market will be in Australia.
Sure. Thanks, Sally. I'm Samad Momin. I'm with Vina Energy. Vina Energy is a leading renewable energy producer in Asia Pacific region. We essentially do develop, construct, operate about currently about 4 gigawatt of renewables, which is a mix of wind, solar, and storage. And specifically in Australia, we just finished the biggest solar plant in Wandong, which is a battery energy storage. That's what you see in the background of my screen. And because we operate around 8 countries, we basically see the magnitude from 2 megawatt to 270 megawatt of plants. And one of the key things we try to focus on is how do we support and serve all these plants. We have about 72 plants. And I think that's what kind of connected to go as you go off the grid. How do you serve? How do you do the ecosystem, especially with emerging technologies where safety is a big issue? It was with battery storage. I think one of the key things for the take-up to happen is one, of course, is the demand. And second, I think, is the ability to serve that demand in a safe and secure manner, either from a service point of view or working with the community so that the take-up happens without any much concern. I think those 2 key factors have to come together for more take-up to happen. And I think, obviously, Australia is very uniquely positioned with the vast size of the country and the demands that are there. I think initially it is more on the industrial side, and then I think it will be more community solar is the way I see the transition taking up.
I want to come back to many of the threads you mentioned around communities, but I'd like to give an opportunity first to Daniel to introduce himself and give his views on the off-grid market, please.
Good morning. Good morning, everybody. My name is Daniel. I work for AGO. I'm what you would call an originator. Find opportunities and bring them in. What do I think the role of off-grid is? Look, I'll just put two angles from my experience, my recent experience, and it is. I think that Laurie was absolutely right. There is places where we don't have infrastructure, and infrastructure, it is just too expensive to build infrastructure. Let's say that you want to power an oil field gas, or you want to power a mine. And we're seeing like large projects on that space. I think that probably APA will be able to talk a little bit about that. And then the other piece that I see is that I see infrastructure that exists, that it's too expensive to maintain, and perhaps it's not required as well. So we've done another deal with a company that it's based not too far from Laurie, where they are disconnecting houses and putting batteries and solar and generators on the side to run the houses, and that way reduce the cost. I don't know much about the part that Samet was talking about, so I'm very keen to hear more about the community side of things and batteries. So I've heard a little bit about what indigenous communities can do, but yeah, keen to see how we could do that even in a more central setting, especially taking into account that we will need even more infrastructure for electric vehicles. That's pretty interesting. Like, how do we do that infrastructure rollout in a coordinated fashion, which obviously we haven't been good at for a long time.
Stuart, let's come to you. Obviously, you're at the APA. Please introduce yourself to our guest today and your observation on what we're seeing in the off-market space.
Morning, my name's Stuart Davis. So I look after the ops and maintenance team for APA. So we've got about 400 technicians around the country looking after our various assets. APA is about 21 years old. We own about $22 billion worth of assets. Started in pipelines, but we are now the 8th biggest renewable energy generator in Australia. We also own some gas-fired power gen, and we own 2 electricity high voltage direct current transmission lines. So we've got a big variety of different assets, and for that reason, we've got people in all the different groups. Today, we've got people in hydrogen, we could have people in wind, and I'm here for solar. So a lot of our customers don't have electricity options. So in the middle of WA and middle of Queensland, there are gas pipelines where mines can get gas to generate their own electricity, but there is no electricity transmission connection. So really for those people, there is no connection to the grid. There's no option to connect to the grid. 20 years ago, people just wanted diesel supply or gas supply to power their mines. And in the last couple of years, everyone still wants power for their mines, but they all want it with lower carbon or lower CO2. So 13% of the energy used in Australia is in mining, and a lot of that 13%, there's no electricity connection. So it's a big opportunity.
Fascinating, and we'll talk about the business case and the revenue stack that you need to justify that in a minute. But let's go to Warren. And Warren, please introduce yourself and your take on where the off-grid market is.
Thank you, Sally. So it's great to be here. So my name is Warren Wu. I'm the head of project development for Metco EG in Australia, and I should advise everybody our name actually has been rebranded, but we didn't have time to rebrand it for this conference. And the new name is Mytilenios, and the name is actually the name of our parent company back in Greece and Athens. It's a conglomerate. It's got 2.5 billion euro revenues annually. There's several verticals in gas. It's a utility back in Greece. We have wind farms there, but mainly we've been doing. I focus more on the solar storage and sort of areas, and I've been tasked to lead an Australian region and close by in developing projects, acquiring projects and building projects. We have a EPC arm which works closely with us also to build projects, and we've just finished 3 projects in New South Wales, and we're just starting construction on 3 others, and there's more to come. A bit of my background is, I'm Australian, but I was working in the US. I started solar over there, and had the opportunity to come back and work on Broken Hill Solar Farm. Everyone knows about that solar farm, right? And working remote areas, and then going to places like Far North Queensland in Weipa. I don't even know if you know if Weipa exists or not. I didn't know until I was sent there, and extremely insightful project for me, and I think it's relevant to this discussion also about the challenges in working in remote areas and the things that come with it. And I might even, if there's time, share a story about it too.
I would love to hear that. So let's just maybe go and follow the chain of where it all begins. With any development, you start with a site. Maybe Laurie, we'll start with you. What have been some of the considerations that you have made with being able to assess a site, or whether it's suitable for an off-grid?
Oh, look, for us, the sites are driven from a supply side point of view. Usually the infrastructure needs replacing, and just the cost of replacement is too high, and therefore it points to a number of locations where we want to locate some sort of a standalone plan, etc. For us, when it comes to the very smaller end, we end up negotiating with customers, and therefore we don't have any land issues or anything like that. It sits on customers' land itself. But the sites, if you've got a line with 10 customers and 9 agree and 1 doesn't, then your business case doesn't stack up. So we have to go through those sort of negotiations and machinations. And when it stacks up, then all of a sudden you've got 10 sites where you can take a line down, an old line or whatever it is. So it's a long-term play, because those customers are there. They're probably paid for the line anyway in the past, and therefore the infrastructure we put in is a long-term play. It can't be cheap or unreliable. In larger sites, microgrids are still an option, and I think that's probably still an area that's probably underdeveloped in Australia a little bit in terms of a move from bigger grids to microgrids to standalone, and it's certainly an option as well. And there are community batteries and community solar are certainly an option, and we look for opportunities there wherever they come. I'm not sure if I answered your question, Sally, but.
No, you have indeed. So I guess, do you think perhaps, Daniel, do you want to have a comment on the role that choosing the site plays in off-grid?
Well, but my experience is similar to Laurie. Once at this point in time, the opportunities that I've seen, basically the site is asking for it, right? So you will have a customer that has the land. Now, you talk about site selection, and maybe I can change it a little bit to say just to suit what I can talk about. But customer selection, I think it's important. So yes, you need to have the space to put it. So from a site perspective, you need to be able to put it in there because it's behind the meter most of the time, and on private land there is not too much difficulty on the applications, although APA does even bigger things, so you may have a different view of it. But what I think is that what is important is to select the right customer and the right technology, because there is a load and the load needs to be closely matched. The customers get a lot of benefit from being connected to the grid. You guys may not, or you lot probably will appreciate how cheap is the insurance of being connected to the grid. But for a customer that is actually off grid because they live somewhere else, or a line that is unreliable, what is important is that you can find the technology that matches the load profile, which involves, look, solar is pretty straightforward, but then playing with the battery and the battery configuration and exactly how big or how small and how do you want to control it, and then figuring out if you may want to have a diesel genset by the side of it as well, just in case things go pear-shaped. I think that is the important piece, like selecting a customer that has a technology that would allow them to operate seamlessly, because if it's going to be friction and it's going to be difficult, and you're going to have different types of equipment and lots of maintenance, I think that is where the business case will break. And you talked about the stack up of value, and for me there is a piece of value that it's really big. And I had a slide at a presentation a while ago, probably 2 years ago, that had the shape of what do you call it, an iceberg. And really we think about off-grid, and we think about, oh yeah, the fuel cost, oh yeah, the transport cost, and we start stacking up, and really that's just the tip of the iceberg. And you will all be familiar with the iceberg is huge at the bottom, not at the top. So it is about finding what are those values that actually make the iceberg. In my opinion, in my experience, it's mostly been more subjective drivers or replacement of equipment, for example, that is coming to an end, and for some reason people need to think about it because perhaps maintenance is O&M becomes a big issue for them. So yeah, that's my experience.
I guess you've both said the word customer. I think, Laurie, you said it 4 times and you said it 3 times. Can we just understand a little bit better on what does this customer look like? I mean, obviously you understand the need that you've articulated in terms of the demand and the replacement circumstances, but do we know enough about what an ideal customer is, or who is the ideal customer? Perhaps maybe we'll take to you, Stuart.
My answer will be different to the other two. We're not a retailer, so we have no retail customers. All of our customers are miners or AGL or Origin and that sort of thing. So our ideal customer, again, mining, they've got power supply at the moment somehow. There's no electricity, so they're probably running diesel or gas generators. But we do get new customers, in WA, mining is booming at the moment. So gold miners, there's new mines coming up all the time. So sometimes we have a pipeline connection near them, sometimes we don't. So the ideal customer for us is someone who needs an energy supply. At the end of the day, the miners are really focused on energy security. So they must have supply. Every time you trip, that's $1 million or 2 million or 5 million gone. So they must have secure supply. And like I said, they're looking for reduced CO2 now. So our ideal customer is someone who can work with us to find a solution, and you can mix and match. So we're building a microgrid at the moment, 65 megawatts, 14 megawatts of solar, some gas backup and a battery. And you've really just got to work with the customer to optimize how much of each do you want. At the moment, there is no solution where you can just run on solar and batteries for a mine. At the moment, that doesn't work. So you have to mix and match technologies, and they have to understand those issues. And like you mentioned, the control, when you've got several different power sources, the control becomes a big issue, because you can be banging out 20 megawatts of solar and a cloud comes across, and if you don't have a battery to back that up or gas, the mine's down. So it is complex. And there's only a couple in Australia up and running in the mining industry. So as much as it sounds simple, it's not simple, and it is relatively new in Australia.
And certainly we can attest in the number of clients that have expressed the complexity in getting the integration and underestimating the technical challenges to make the security for their systems work. So I think that already, so perhaps it is worth then exploring. Is there anyone in the panel who wants to comment around some of the expectations or the lessons learned from integrating multi-generation sources together? And what have we learned from some of the number of projects that we've done, whether they're in WA or in the NEM? Who wants to take that one? Laurie?
Perhaps I could have a start the ball rolling. I mean, one of the things we're trying to do is go completely off renewable, off hydrocarbons on our microgrids, and that is bringing up all those control challenges that has just been spoken about. Once you start going up that renewable curve, once you start heading past the 80% towards the 90, towards 100%, it becomes extremely complex. And whilst we've had a town of 1,000 people running on renewable energy only for about 80 minutes at Onslow, it was the challenges were incredible with multiple supply side batteries and behind the meter batteries. I think that's the area that needs a lot of work, and there's lots of opportunities there. Once you scale that back down, what we do need is customers that do understand the value of energy at the residential level, particularly. And I think a lot of farming communities certainly do, because it's a survival issue for them. And reliance on electricity now is becoming more and more with appliances, phones, communications, water pumping. So batteries become an absolute essential that can provide that survival mechanism during those periods when there isn't any sun or wind, which isn't spoken about much, but that's also, I think, plays a role.
Maybe Warren, what are your views on the constructability challenges then that you've seen in implementing these off-grid systems?
Thanks. All right. Constructability of these off-grid systems. I think in general, it's, I mean, it's like what Daniel mentioned about, this iceberg, people think that, if you plan well, everything will go perfectly or should be close to it. And it's so far from the case. All these, all the projects I've been on and I've seen or seen elsewhere, there's always so much unknown, and the expectations that, to the customer needs to be really managed well in that regards, because having a finite date, finite commissioning date, finite dates for delivery, those can all be blown out in remote areas. And I'll go back to Weipa, which I mentioned earlier when I introduced myself. That was as remote I've been, and it's often them. It's on its own little grid system with Rio Tinto mine. Everything during the wet season has to be barged in. So there's wet season. The bridges are unsafe. It's flooding, so you can't transport anything in. So you're fitting when you get into those kind of time periods, and you miss certain time seasons. With building or constructing a plant, the challenge there can be blown out by several months at a time, and getting the right specialists and all those kind of things. I could go on, but it becomes a real challenge, and needs to be really tempered well with the customer and all the stakeholders involved.
Anybody else on the panel want to comment on the constructability challenges and getting them to COD?
Well, what I can what I can say about building these things is every single one that you build is different. So there is as you are building the system to match a customer, and customers tend to use their loads in very different ways. Even two mines won't be the same and the same equipment and the same way of processing, because that's where they differentiate actually in how they run their plants. So given that each of them ends up being significantly different, I think I agree with the rest of the panel that a big part of the risk, other than getting the people to site and being able to deal with weather, but and probably foreign exchange for whatever you're importing, but that the biggest risk for me, as I see it, is that integration piece. And the fact that and that is reflected in many customers actually asking for somebody that will build and then they will operate and maintain. So when I've spoken with mines, and when you talk about residential customers, they are not trying to buy an asset and run the asset themselves. They just want electricity, and they want electricity reliably, 24/7. I press the button, lights go on. So so then it's the operation of and maintenance of these assets, and the nature of them being off grid means that they are all very distributed and far away. So suddenly you need to have asset teams that can maintain. Yes, we all think, okay, the cloud, and you just look at it all through a screen. But reality is that you do need to dispatch people when you need to dispatch people, and even if it doesn't happen that often, you need to be able to do it, which means that you need to cover vast extents of territory with not much opportunity to get scale, economies of scale by having multiple of them. So you end up having like multiple small operations on different places. So it becomes expensive. They are all different, and an integration can be an issue. So I see a huge risk on that piece, and as Laurie said, it would need to be solved. I think that microgrid controllers are getting better, but we haven't deployed. We don't deploy them that often, so it's kind of hard.
Really
if I may comment a little bit on the challenges of constructability, I think there is a different aspect that we have seen. Maybe our scale was different of our plans. Is actually it's an opportunity for local employment. The fact that the local bakery gets excited when the construction is happening. So all those things where, while there are technical challenges, I think is a huge opportunity from a stakeholder management to create that license to operate it, create that buy-in. I think that's something I think we should always kind of think of, and we have found those kind of examples of actually the local employment highlighting that. And like as Daniel mentioned, the build operate, the people that there might be maybe some employment, might be just 2 people near the project area, but also those kind of things create some positive energy in the system. And I think that's something we need to always keep in mind, and how do we leverage it? Yeah.
With our mining customers too. So there's only a couple of mines in Australia that have got some renewable power, but they are seeing that they're actually finding it easier to attract miners because they've got renewable energy. So that's an interesting thing that we didn't expect to see quite yet, but it's happening.
I like it's working again. It's great. That's how technology works, and expect that on the field also. The other part that Smart mentioned was really good. I think every time I'm on these sites, the first thing that I notice is the community coming to you and asking, "Oh, is this going to lower our cost?" I said, "Not necessarily, but it will lower the pollution in that area. It will offset your diesel generators that's running off, and it's going to be better for you, better for your families around that area, because these are really small communities that we're living off." So that's something really good that we should promote and continue to excite the community about.
I want to tease out from you a little bit, Samad, around the community engagement and the social license topic that you raised. To what extent is it different, or is the proposition for communities different for off-grid than it has been for, let's say, utility scale projects?
Again, I think I had limited experience of very small scale. With that caveat, my view is anything renewables, I think the community engagement is pretty similar. When you're trying to build a wind farm, and then there are these concerns about what does it do to me for either the aesthetic or health reasons, or for that matter, when you're putting a battery plant where sometimes we have had some press as the emerging technology fires coming up from a safety point of view. I think the key, is engagement, education. And once you have those two things done repeatedly, and that takes time, and going local, I think having a project manager based there, not just fly in, fly out, or more importantly, you won't be able to do that, then identifying a local citizen who becomes kind of the face of the project and kind of has an opportunity both from during the construction, during the project, and post engagement or employment, I think is very critical, so that it's not kind of perceived as somebody coming from fly in, fly out. Though most of these communities sometimes do have a lot of fly in, fly out people, traffic. I think that's kind of the key thing that we have found is going local so that you have the key influencer as part of your project and educate and engage. Yeah. I don't know whether that answers your question, but that's, I think, is pretty common higher scale or lower scale. In fact, for smaller towns, it becomes all the more, I think, important.
And I second that. I was involved in a project where I was brought in because the main contractor didn't have that presence on site. And even though it wasn't a big project, I was brought in and I was actually based on site, fly in, fly out, nevertheless, but still mostly out there. And it was a huge difference to the client, to the customer, and to the community out there, just to see that presence and be able to answer those questions when needed. And when they hold those sort of public sessions with the community, which often happens with these mining towns, it makes a big difference to just have that presence continually and say that you're there, you're always managing it. And yeah.
I want to sort of maybe be on the same page as everyone here on the audience in terms of what do we see as when we think of an off-grid system, is there such a thing as sort of a range of sizes or technologies or technology mixes that, given how long we've had solar in the market now and wind, do we know what that looks like for an off-grid solution? Is it only solar, for example? What are your views on what an off-grid system looks like or should look like?
Well, I can add my view to that. It's absolutely anything that you want it to be that will probably bring the cost down. As I mentioned before, I think wind doesn't get much of a play in some of the smaller systems, but I think there's a place for small wind turbines, 5-10 kilowatt at a residential level and upwards from that. They're very difficult to find in the market. But nowadays we're starting to look at hydrogen as an option. Fuel cells, etc. I think the critical issue is what is it that you want to get out of the plant. Generally, people don't see the total cost and if they're paying the normal franchise rate for energy and they don't see the cost behind them that to deliver that energy to that meter, then the community probably won't care as long as if their driver is renewable, they see renewable energy being provided. And I think that's so the mix can be anything you like, really. At the end of the day, it's whatever you have in abundance. We certainly here in WA have a lot of sunshine, so we use a lot of that. Near the coast, there is a problem because we do have cyclone-rated regions, which create a bit of a problem with solar panels, but you can get around that. So yeah, whatever you like, really.
Well, again, I can just talk about, I completely agree with Laurie. This is about the customer and their load and what is abundant there and how do you make it happen. But you definitely need generation and absolutely, I think these days to make it really work, you need storage of some sort. Somebody was telling me the other day about this kinetic energy storage and just mechanic energy storage, just raising pieces of or blocks of concrete and then dropping the blocks of concrete, and that way just driving a turbine, which I thought, yeah, okay, well, if you can get cheap rocks and a turbine, why not? But my experience is on the small side, like residential side. I was lucky enough to participate on standardizing and on trying to standardize a model so we could deploy hundreds of them, if not thousands of them one day. And I think that the difficulty comes, you need to start creating brackets for homes. So you have you took the approach small, medium, large, extra large sort of thing. But then you suddenly realize you need an extra small, and some people need a small medium, right? So it just starts becoming, you need to build your blocks and try to standardize that way, or at least you can do that. The challenge then becomes that for each solution, let's say that you have small, medium, and large, you will find that perhaps ABB has the base battery for the medium ones. But then if you're looking at the smaller end, ABB may not be anymore the one, and you may want to do Tesla. And I've just mentioned, no cherry here. I don't get any money from anyone. But it's just brands that we know about. Or Schneider may have the right one for the big size. And that really brings complexity, because you end up, it's difficult to standardize on equipment. It may be a little bit easier to standardize on the solution, but then every solution that you have has a different type of equipment. And given that everything is evolving so fast, it's even worse, right? Like, not worse, but it creates that extra complexity of, okay, what is would the solutions that you standardize today be the right solutions in 5 years? And if you need to operate and maintain these things for 10 or 15 years, it just creates all those complexities. So I think that is the main issue. And then on the large space, I could talk a fair bit about that as well. But I think that our friends, Stuart will have a lot more view on that.
Yeah, on that, I think someone mentioned before, all of these systems are basically bespoke. So everyone's designed for the customer, which is fantastic for the customer, because you get exactly what you want, whether you want wind or solar or whatever. But that does come with extra costs. So I think that's an opportunity for all of us going forward. How do we come up with sort of standardized solutions? And then if you've got a standardized solution, it might be a bit big for the particular application. What do you do with that extra energy? So Laurie mentioned hydrogen. Hydrogen is something potentially transferable that you can sell. So there'll be opportunities going forward as we figure this out.
Okay, I've been told I've got to hurry up, but I do have a really important question to wrap up. And that is, we don't get anywhere in our sector without being able to finance and attract investments into this. What do you believe investors should know about the standalone power systems? And I guess notwithstanding, we all know that it's very common for investors to come up with a view that, oh, I've heard that if I do a 1 megawatt system, I can just get through the grid I can get through this connection process in terms of getting the system synchronized much quicker. And there's all these, sometimes these rules that people have that are not necessarily correct. What do we tell investors around the role in financing them, and should they stand behind these SAPs? Anyone? Maybe Stuart?
For those of you that saw one of the previous presentations, we talked about the value of the renewable energy certificates effectively. Electricity, there's a traded market in that. There's the Australian carbon credits. There was also talk about how do you do that for hydrogen? So how do you get some sort of credit for the low carbon hydrogen? I think all of those things will be really interesting going forward for off-grid. So can there be a market where, rather than using coal-powered electricity, a community goes to a renewable system, and can they generate some revenue to offset the cost based on the zero CO2 outcome? So it's not something that we can answer in this room, but I think for government regulators, it's a really interesting place to think about. And in my view, we should be supporting groups that are willing to trial these new technologies, pilot these new technologies. How do you justify it in today's conditions yeah, you have to make assumptions. So every investment is a risk. Someone was mentioning before that people just want to see the spreadsheet. What's the rate of return? Same for these. You've got to make some assumptions around wind and solar, and you can, there's lots of studies, so you can do the studies. You've got to do your groundwork to make sure that it all adds up and you've got all your assumptions right.
A
right.
couple of audience questions sound good. No, no.
I'd welcome your questions from the audience.
Asia, Indonesia, 300 million people, Philippines, I don't know, it's 100 million there. I'm just wondering about the opportunities for development and helping those countries get electricity going. Lots of places there don't have well-developed grids to start off with, similar to the phone system. And I'm just interested in your thoughts about what would be necessary or what would be involved in Australian companies helping those countries to get their remote grids going and help them decarbonise as well and improve their living standards.
Yeah, no, that's a great vision, right? Like I'm with you. And lots of people have seen it, but it would be awesome, right? To have containerized solutions that you just put on boats and ship to wherever you need, and maybe they can even be moved around for disaster relief and things like that. With the new technologies like what 5B does, that you can just open solar very easily, and the fact that you can, like the background from Samad, that you can have just a nice enclosed area with batteries and stuff. It's all pre-wired. We've done those. The way we did, the way we went about developing off-grid systems for beam pumps for the donkeys that get oil out of the ground in South Australia. We actually build them all on a factory, and they just go on containers on trucks. So yeah, it is absolutely standardizable, and you could put them on a plane or on a boat and send them to islands and third world countries. Where I wonder though, I wonder, well, you send them all and you put them around. I have an accent, you have noticed. I come from South America, not seen a lot of poverty around very poor places. And you can only wonder, you send these things there, you put them on the ground, and where exactly do you connect them, and who is
Hello.
Hello, hi, Sama and Laura.
Yeah. Hi.
I think there is something wrong with our screen on site. I'll try to contact the operator and fix this
Okay,
problem
thank
as
you.
soon as possible.
Thank you. I was thinking, was it me? I appreciate that.
Hi, Laura and Simon. I'm Honan. I just got a call from my colleague, which is on site, and they called me that the power was like accidentally cut off, and they are just fixing this problem. So I think the problem will be fixed in 5 minutes. So please wait for.
Okay.
All right.
That's interesting.
Power outage.
Yep, there was a cloud over the solar farm that was feeding it.
Yep.
I thought the question by the gentleman who were in the audience was a pretty interesting one in Indonesia and Philippines. And I need to thank him. I need to go and explore with my team because we have not actually talked about it, because we do have utility scale farms in both in Indonesia and in Philippines. But this hasn't come up actually, or at least no, I've not heard about it.
There are small pod standalone power systems available now that you can lift and put in position for a small community or even a single household. So and they just fold out solar panels. So there are options that's becoming available now.
It's like almost going from B2B to B2C.
Yes. Yep. Looks like they're in the dark.
Yeah. I had to ask you, Laurie, I tried to use this backdrop. Is it very glazy or is it okay? My battery backdrop.
It's pretty spectacular, really. It's pretty good. Yeah.
Okay. You know, when I went there, it felt like a Lego factory.
Yes, well,
it is.
Looks all right to me. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's better than mine.
No. Yeah, yes, it's cool. Very cool. The irony of discussing power and having an outage is just unbelievable. You don't have to be off the grid. You're in the center of a big city, of a metropolitan city. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
While we're waiting, I think you have the ultimate microgrid, micro support system among all the panelists that I could think of. When I first spoke to you, I realized you are really the poster child for this sector.
Yeah, well, we have the opportunity, really, far more than other people. Yeah, absolutely. And so we've got opportunities every day coming up in this space, from very small to much bigger.
Sure.
I don't know what's happening there.
I'm thinking most probably they will conclude the session, I would think, to catch up on time.
Yeah. I think the other
until they don't have power in the room itself, then that's a different thing. I don't know whether they are having challenges within the room or connectivity to us.
I don't know.
Hello, hi, Laurie and Emma.
Yeah.
I'm really sorry because I just had a call with my colleague on site and told me that because it still takes some time to really fix the equipment on site, so they decided to end this session. So I really appreciate it for your participation, and I think you're going to have more communication with the panelists. You can contact them in the email, but I really appreciate your participation.
No problems at all. Yeah.
So sorry for the tech error on our side.
That's okay. That's
See you,
okay.
Thomas.
It happens. Take care. Now, Laurie, nice seeing you again, mate.
See you next year in person, Sam and Laurie.
Absolutely.
Cheers.
See ya.
Great. Bye.
Bye.